When I woke up that Tuesday morning in December, I had no idea my entire world was about to crumble like a stale Christmas cookie. The smell of cinnamon and nutmeg still lingered in my kitchen from the day before when I'd spent hours preparing my famous sweet potato pie and cornbread stuffing. My hands were still sore from kneading the dough for the dinner rolls I'd planned to serve at what I thought would be the most beautiful family Christmas dinner we'd had in years. You see, I'm 73 years old, and I've been hosting Christmas dinner for my family for over 4 decades. It started when my late husband, Jerome, was still with us, back when my son Marcus was just a little boy who would sneak into the kitchen to steal pieces of turkey skin when he thought I wasn't looking. Those were the days when Christmas meant something, when family meant something, when showing up for the people who love you was just what you did. Without question, Jerome passed away 8 years ago, and since then, Christmas has felt different, quieter, lonelier, but I kept the tradition alive because I believed, foolishly as it turns out, that family traditions matter, that blood runs thicker than water, that the woman who changed your diapers and kissed your scraped knees and worked 2 jobs to put you through college deserves at least one day a year when you show up at her table with gratitude in your heart. Marcus is my only child, and when he married Vanessa 5 years ago, I welcomed her with open arms. I thought I was gaining a daughter, someone who would help carry on our family traditions, someone who would understand the importance of keeping our family bond strong. Vanessa seemed sweet enough at first, with her bright smile and her promises to learn my mother's secret recipes. She called me Mama Ruth, which made my heart sing, because it reminded me of the daughter I never had, but always wanted. They have 2 beautiful children, my grandchildren, 7-year-old Destiny and 4-year-old Cameron. Those babies are the light of my life, the reason I keep going some days when the loneliness of this empty house threatens to swallow me whole. Destiny has my eyes, and Cameron has Jerome's stubborn chin, and when they run into my arms, calling me Grandmama, I feel like the richest woman in the world. But something changed after they got married. At first, it was subtle things I tried to ignore because I didn't want to be that mother-in-law, the one who causes problems and drives wedges between husband and wife. Vanessa started making little comments about how my house was too old-fashioned, how my cooking was too heavy, how maybe it was time for the younger generation to start hosting holidays. Marcus, my sweet boy, who used to defend me against anyone and anything, started nodding along with her suggestions like a bobblehead doll. The missed phone calls became more frequent. The canceled Sunday dinners piled up with excuses about soccer practice and play dates and Vanessa's book club meetings. The grandchildren's visits became shorter and less frequent, always rushed because they had somewhere more important to be. I started feeling like I was begging for scraps of attention from my own family, and that's a feeling no mother should ever have to endure. But this Christmas was supposed to be different. 3 weeks ago, I called Marcus and invited them all for Christmas dinner. I told him I was planning something special, that I wanted to create beautiful memories with my grandchildren, that at my age, we never know how many more Christmases we'll have together. He said yes, without hesitation, promised they'd all be there at 2 o'clock sharp, and even asked if he could bring anything to help with the meal. For 3 weeks, I planned and shopped and prepared like Christmas dinner was going to be featured in a magazine. I bought Destiny the art supplies she'd been wanting and found Cameron a set of toy trucks that I knew would make him squeal with delight. I polished my good china, the set Jerome bought me for our 10th wedding anniversary, the one I only use for the most special occasions. I pressed my finest tablecloth and arranged fresh flowers in the centerpiece. I spent 2 days cooking everything from scratch. The turkey was a 20-pound beauty that I brined overnight and basted every 30 minutes until the skin was golden brown and crispy. The ham was glazed with brown sugar and pineapple, just the way Marcus loved it when he was growing up. I made my grandmother's macaroni and cheese recipe, the one with 3 different kinds of cheese, and a secret ingredient I've never told another living soul. The collard greens simmered all day with smoked turkey necks, and I baked 2 kinds of cornbread because I couldn't remember if Vanessa preferred the sweet or the savory version. The sweet potato pie was perfection, with a flaky crust that would melt in your mouth and filling so smooth it looked like silk. I made banana pudding from scratch, layering vanilla wafers and fresh bananas with homemade custard that took me 2 hours to get just right. The dinner rolls were soft as clouds, brushed with butter and sprinkled with sea salt. I even made Vanessa's favorite cranberry sauce, the kind with orange zest and chopped walnuts that takes forever to prepare, but adds such elegance to the meal. Christmas morning arrived with the kind of crisp winter air that makes everything feel magical and full of possibility. I woke up before dawn, not because I had to, but because excitement had been building in my chest. For weeks, I put on my best red dress, the one with the subtle sparkle that makes me feel like royalty. And I did my hair and makeup with extra care because I wanted to look beautiful for my family. I wanted them to see their mother and grandmother glowing with joy and pride. The table was set like something out of a holiday movie. My good china gleamed under the chandelier, and the silverware Jerome's mother had passed down to us caught the light like tiny mirrors. The centerpiece of winter flowers and pine cones looked elegant and festive, surrounded by flickering candles that cast a warm glow over everything. I had folded the napkins into perfect triangles and placed a small wrapped gift at each person's place setting. At 1 o'clock, I started warming everything up, timing it perfectly so that every dish would be at the ideal temperature when my family walked through the door. The turkey came out of the oven golden and magnificent, and I let it rest while I put the finishing touches on the side dishes. The house smelled like heaven, like love and tradition, and all the best parts of Christmas rolled into one incredible feast. 2 o'clock came and went. I checked my phone, thinking maybe Marcus had sent a message about running late, but there was nothing. I called his number, and it went straight to voicemail. I called again 10 minutes later with the same result. By 2:30, a knot was forming in my stomach. But I told myself they were probably just stuck in traffic or having trouble getting the kids ready to leave the house. By 3 o'clock, the food was starting to cool down, and I was pacing around my dining room like a caged animal. I called Marcus 3 more times, each call going to voicemail like a slap in the face. I sent text messages asking if everything was okay, if someone was sick, if they needed help with anything. The silence from the other end was deafening. 4 o'clock arrived with the devastating realization that they weren't coming. My beautiful Christmas dinner sat untouched on the table, growing cold and lifeless, like my hopes for a perfect family celebration. The candles had burned down to little stubs, and the flowers in the centerpiece seemed to mock me with their cheerful red and green colors. I sat alone at that perfectly set table, staring at the empty chairs where my family should have been sitting, and I felt something break inside my chest. Not just disappointment or sadness, but something deeper and more permanent. It was the sound of trust shattering, of unconditional love reaching its limits, of a mother's heart finally accepting that she had been taken for granted one too many times. The worst part wasn't even the wasted food or the ruined plans. It was the silence. No phone call, no text message, no explanation or apology, just empty chairs and cold turkey, and the crushing weight of realizing that I had become invisible to my own son and his family. I finally called Marcus one more time at 5 o'clock, and this time he answered on the third ring. His voice was cheerful and relaxed, like he was having the most wonderful day in the world. "Hey, Marcus," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. "We were expecting you all for dinner. Is everything all right?" There was a pause, and I could hear laughter and music in the background. Children's voices, my grandchildren's voices. They were somewhere having a celebration while I sat alone with enough food to feed an army. "Oh, Mom," Marcus said, and I could hear the awkwardness creeping into his voice. "I meant to call you earlier. We decided to do Christmas at Vanessa's sister's house this year. It was kind of a last-minute thing." Last minute. 3 weeks of planning, 2 days of cooking, and it was a last-minute decision to abandon their mother. On Christmas Day, I felt the room spinning around me as the reality of what he was saying sank in. "But Marcus," I whispered, "we had plans. I cooked everything, the table is set. I've been waiting for you all day." "I know, Mom, and I'm sorry, but you know how it is. Vanessa's family lives closer, and it's just easier with the kids. Maybe we can stop by later if we have time." If they had time, if visiting their mother and grandmother fit into their busy social calendar. I hung up the phone without saying goodbye, because I didn't trust my voice not to break completely. I spent that Christmas evening alone, boxing up containers of food that would last me weeks, blowing out melted candles, and carefully folding the tablecloth that would go back into the closet until next year, if there was a next year. The gifts I'd bought for Destiny and Cameron sat under my tree, wrapped in bright paper with curly ribbons, waiting for grandchildren who couldn't spare 2 hours for the woman who had given them life through their father. The days after Christmas blurred together in a haze of leftover turkey sandwiches and daytime television. I kept expecting Marcus to call with an explanation, an apology, something to acknowledge what had happened, but my phone stayed silent, except for telemarketers trying to sell me insurance I didn't need. It was December 30th when Vanessa finally called, and her voice was different from the sweet, syrupy tone she usually used when she wanted something from me. This time, she sounded desperate. "Mama Ruth," she said, and I noticed she was back to calling me Mama Ruth instead of the more distant Mrs. Johnson she'd been using lately. "I hope you had a nice Christmas." The audacity of that statement hit me like a physical blow. A nice Christmas, sitting alone at a table for 6, watching my carefully prepared meal grow cold, while my family celebrated somewhere else, without even the courtesy of a phone call, until I had to track them down myself. "What do you need, Vanessa?" I asked, cutting straight through her fake pleasantries. I'd learned over the years that when family members who ignore you suddenly call out of the blue, they want something, "Well," she said, and I could hear her taking a deep breath like she was preparing to dive into deep water. "We're having a little situation with our house. The landlord is being unreasonable about some late fees, and we might need to find a new place to live pretty quickly. Some late fees." That's how she described what I would later learn was 3 months of unpaid rent. and an eviction notice that had been served on Christmas Eve. The irony wasn't lost on me, that while they were too busy to spend Christmas with me, they weren't too busy to get themselves kicked out of their home. "How much do you need?" I asked, because despite everything, these were my grandchildren we were talking about. Destiny and Cameron didn't deserve to be homeless because their parents couldn't manage their finances. "It's not just about money, Mama Ruth," Vanessa said, and now her voice was getting that wheedling quality that made my teeth itch. "We were wondering if maybe we could stay with you for a little while, just until we get back on our feet. The kids love spending time with their grandmother, and it would give us a chance to look for something better." Stay with me. The same people who couldn't be bothered to show up for Christmas dinner now wanted to move into my house because they had nowhere else to go. The same daughter-in-law who had made comments about my old-fashioned decor and heavy cooking now wanted to take refuge under my old-fashioned roof. "Let me think about it," I said, because I needed time to process what was happening. "I'll call you back." But before I could hang up, Vanessa's voice turned sharp and demanding. "Mama Ruth, we really need an answer soon. We have to be out by New Year's Day, and moving trucks are expensive. Plus, the kids are asking about their Christmas presents. Destiny keeps asking why we didn't go to Grandmama's house, like we promised." So Destiny had been expecting to come for Christmas dinner. My granddaughter had been disappointed too, which meant the decision to skip our family dinner had hurt more people than just me. And now they were using my grandchildren's disappointment as leverage to guilt me into helping them out of the mess they'd created. "I said I'll call you back," I repeated. And this time, I did hang up. I spent that night lying awake, staring at the ceiling and thinking about everything that had led to this moment. The missed birthdays that were explained away with busy schedules. The Mother's Day that passed without so much as a card because they forgot. The times I'd offered to babysit so Marcus and Vanessa could have date nights, only to be told they'd rather use someone younger and more energetic. For years, I'd been making excuses for their behavior, telling myself that young families are busy, that I needed to be more understanding, that I shouldn't expect too much from people who had their own lives to live. But lying there in the dark on December 30th, I finally admitted to myself what I'd been trying to ignore. They didn't respect me. They didn't value me. They saw me as a convenience, someone to call when they needed something, but not someone worth including in their important moments. I was the backup plan, the safety net, the person who would always be there no matter how poorly they treated me, because I was family, and family is supposed to forgive everything. But respect is a two-way street, and I'd been traveling down a one-way road for far too long. The next morning, New Year's Eve, my phone rang before I'd even finished my first cup of coffee. It was Marcus this time, and his voice had that edge to it that told me Vanessa had sent him to apply pressure. "Mom, we really need an answer about staying with you," he said, without even saying good morning. "The movers are coming tomorrow, and we need to know where to tell them to take our stuff." "Where are you moving to, Marcus?" I asked. "That's what we're trying to figure out. Look, I know Christmas didn't go the way you wanted, but this is about the kids. Do you really want your grandchildren to be homeless?" There it was again, using Destiny and Cameron as emotional weapons. The same children they couldn't be bothered to bring for Christmas dinner were suddenly the reason I should open my home to people who had shown me nothing but disrespect. "Marcus," I said slowly, "let me ask you something. When you decided to skip Christmas dinner, did you think about how that would make me feel?" "Mom, it wasn't personal. We just thought it would be easier." "Easier for who? Easier for you to hurt your mother's feelings? Easier for you to waste the food I spent 2 days preparing. Easier for you to break promises you made to your children. The silence on the other end told me he wasn't expecting me to fight back. For years, I'd been the accommodating mother, the understanding grandmother, the woman who swallowed her hurt feelings and kept her mouth shut to keep the peace. "We can talk about Christmas later," Marcus said finally. "Right now, we need to focus on finding a place for my family to live." His family, not our family. His family. As if I wasn't part of it anymore. As if my feelings and my home were just resources for him to use when convenient. "You're right," I said. "You do need to find a place for your family to live, but it won't be with me." The words came out of my mouth before I'd even fully formed the thought. But once they were out there, I realized they felt right. They felt like the truth I'd been avoiding for months. "Mom, what are you saying?" "I'm saying that people who don't have time for Christmas dinner with their mother probably don't have time to live with their mother either. I'm saying that you made your choice about what kind of relationship you want with me. And now I'm making mine." "But Mom," Marcus stammered, and I could hear the panic creeping into his voice. "We have nowhere else to go. Vanessa's sister doesn't have room for all four of us, and her parents live in that tiny apartment. You have all this space, and we're family. Family." That word used to mean something sacred to me, something unbreakable and precious. But sitting there in my kitchen, surrounded by the remnants of Christmas decorations that no one had come to enjoy, I realized that family isn't just about blood. It's about showing up. It's about respect. It's about making the people you love feel valued and wanted. "Marcus," I said, my voice growing stronger with each word, "when your father was dying, who sat by his hospital bed for 3 weeks straight? When you needed money for your wedding, who gave you $5,000 without asking questions? When Destiny was born and Vanessa had complications, who took care of Cameron for 2 months while you focused on your wife and new baby?" The silence stretched between us like a chasm. "You did, Mom," he whispered, finally. "That's right. I did. Because that's what family does. Family shows up. Family keeps promises. Family doesn't abandon each other on Christmas Day without so much as a phone call." I could hear whispering in the background, probably Vanessa coaching him on what to say next. When he spoke again, his voice had that rehearsed quality that told me she was feeding him lines. "Mom, we're sorry about Christmas. We really are. But we can't change what happened. Right now, we need your help. And if you turn your back on us, you're turning your back on your grandchildren too." The manipulation in those words was so thick I could almost taste it. They were betting on my love for Destiny and Cameron, counting on the fact that I would sacrifice my dignity to make sure those babies had a roof over their heads. And 6 months ago, they would have been right. But something had shifted inside me during those lonely hours on Christmas Day. Something had crystallized when I sat at that beautifully set table, staring at empty chairs and cold food, realizing that I had become invisible to my own family. "No, Marcus," I said. "If anyone is turning their back on those children, it's you and your wife. You're the ones who got evicted. You're the ones who made financial decisions that put your family in this position. You're the ones who chose to skip Christmas dinner with their grandmother, breaking promises you made to them about seeing their presents and eating Grandmama's cooking." "But Mom," I'm not finished. My voice was steady now, filled with a strength I hadn't felt in years. "For months, I've been making excuses for you. Both Vanessa doesn't like my house, so we meet at restaurants. You're too busy for Sunday dinners, so I settle for quick phone calls. The children have activities, so I only see them when it's convenient for you. I've been shrinking myself smaller and smaller, trying not to be a burden, trying not to ask for too much, trying to be the perfect mother and grandmother who never complains. I stood up and walked to my living room window, looking out at the quiet street where I'd lived for 37 years, where I'd raised my son, where I'd buried my husband, where I'd planned to spend my golden years surrounded by the love of my family. But you know what I realized, sitting at that table on Christmas Day? I continued. I realized that I've been begging for crumbs of affection from people who see me as nothing more than a bank account, with feelings you don't call unless you need something. You don't visit unless you want something. And now that you need something big, suddenly I'm family again. That's not fair, Mom. We love you. Do you? Because love isn't just a word, Marcus. Love is action. Love is showing up when you say you will. Love is remembering that the woman who gave you life deserves more than your leftover time and attention. I heard Vanessa's voice in the background, sharp and insistent, though I couldn't make out the words. When Marcus came back to the phone, his tone had changed completely. Fine, Mom. If that's how you want to be, then fine. But don't come crying to us later when you're lonely and need help. Don't expect us to take care of you when you're too old to take care of yourself. The threat hung in the air like smoke from a fire. Take care of me? The same people who couldn't manage their own rent were threatening to withhold care from me? The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so pathetic. Marcus Jerome Johnson, I said, using his full name the way I had when he was a child who needed correction. Let me make something crystal clear to you. I am 73 years old. I own my house outright. I have excellent health insurance, a solid retirement account, and more importantly, I have self-respect, something you seem to have lost along the way. Mom, please. I said I wasn't finished. The woman you're threatening is the same woman who worked double shifts at the hospital to pay for your college education while your father was sick. The same woman who taught you how to drive, how to tie your shoes, how to treat people with kindness and respect. Clearly, that last lesson didn't stick. I could hear crying in the background. Now Vanessa, probably, realizing that their safety net had just disappeared. So here's what's going to happen, I continued. You're going to figure out your housing situation on your own, like the grown man I raised you to be. You're going to explain to your children why they can't see their grandmother right now. And you're going to think long and hard about the kind of son and father you want to be. This is ridiculous. You're being petty and vindictive. No, Marcus. I'm being a woman who finally remembered her worth. There's a difference. I hung up the phone and sat in the silence of my empty house. For the first time in months, it didn't feel lonely. It felt peaceful. The phone rang again immediately, but I didn't answer. It rang 12 more times over the next hour, switching between Marcus's number and Vanessa's. Then the text messages started. Mom, please reconsider. We have nowhere else to go. The kids are asking for you. We can pay rent if that's what you want. Don't do this to your family. You're going to regret this. Please, Mom, I'm begging you. Begging. I turned off my phone and made myself a cup of tea. Real tea. Not the herbal nonsense Vanessa was always pushing on me because she read somewhere that caffeine was bad for people my age. I made it strong and hot and sweet, just the way Jerome used to like it. And I sat in his old recliner and let myself feel proud for the first time in a very long time. The next 3 days passed quietly. I caught up on reading, organized my recipe collection, and even started a jigsaw puzzle I'd been meaning to tackle for months. I didn't turn my phone back on until January 3rd. And when I did, I had 47 missed calls and 26 text messages. Most of them were from Marcus and Vanessa, growing increasingly desperate as the days passed. But there were also messages from numbers I didn't recognize. And when I read them, I realized word of their situation was spreading through our small community. Vanessa's sister had apparently refused to let them stay longer than 2 nights. Vanessa's parents had said their apartment was too small. Marcus's old college friends were all busy with their own families. One by one, their options were disappearing, and according to the messages, they'd been sleeping in their car for the past 2 nights, while their belongings sat in a storage unit they could barely afford. Part of me felt sorry for Destiny and Cameron, innocent children caught in their parents' mess. But a larger part of me recognized that feeling sorry for my grandchildren and enabling their parents' disrespectful behavior were 2 very different things. On January 4th, my doorbell rang at 8 in the morning. I looked through the peephole and saw Vanessa standing on my front porch, and she looked terrible. Her hair was unwashed and pulled back in a messy ponytail. Her clothes were wrinkled like she'd slept in them, and her eyes were red and puffy from crying. I opened the door, but didn't invite her in. "Mama Ruth," she said, and her voice was hoarse and desperate. "Please, we need your help. The kids have been asking for you, and Marcus is talking to a lawyer about filing for emergency assistance. But you know how slow that process is. We just need a place to stay for a few weeks while we get back on our feet." "Where are the children now?" I asked. "They're in the car with Marcus. We didn't want to upset them by bringing them to the door if you were going to say no." I looked past her to the street and saw Marcus's sedan parked at the curb. I could make out 2 small shapes in the back seat, and my heart ached for those babies who didn't understand why their world had suddenly become so unstable. "Vanessa," I said carefully, "let me ask you something. When you decided to have Christmas at your sister's house instead of here, whose idea was it?" She shifted uncomfortably on my porch, wrapping her arms around herself against the cold January air. "It was a family decision," she said finally. "That's not what I asked. Whose idea was it originally?" The silence stretched between us, and I could see her trying to decide how much truth she could afford to tell mine. She admitted quietly, "It was my idea. And why didn't you want to come here for Christmas? Mama Ruth, does it matter now? We're in crisis mode here. My children are living in a car because their father's mother won't help them." The deflection was smooth, but I wasn't letting her off the hook that easily. "It matters to me. I spent 3 weeks planning that dinner. I spent 2 days cooking. I set my table with my finest china and waited for 4 hours for family that never showed up. So yes, it matters. Why didn't you want to come here?" Vanessa's composure finally cracked, and when she spoke, her voice was filled with the kind of honesty that only comes from desperation. "Because I'm tired of pretending to enjoy your heavy food and listening to your old stories and sitting in this museum of a house, looking at pictures of people I never met," she snapped. "Because Christmas should be fun and relaxed, not some formal dinner where I have to watch my every word and make sure the kids don't touch anything valuable." There it was, the truth I'd been sensing but trying to ignore for years. To Vanessa, I wasn't a beloved mother-in-law or cherished grandmother. I was an obligation, a chore, something to be endured rather than enjoyed. "And what about Marcus?" I asked. "Did he feel the same way?" "Marcus does whatever makes me happy," she said, and there was a hint of smugness in her voice, despite her desperate circumstances. "That's what good husbands do." "I see. So when you told your sister's family that you were only inviting special people to Christmas, you meant people who weren't me." Her face went pale. You heard about that? Small community, Vanessa. Word gets around, especially when you humiliate someone's grandmother at a family gathering. I didn't mean it the way it sounded. How did you mean it? Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like you told a room full of people that Marcus's mother wasn't special enough to spend Christmas with her own family. Vanessa started crying. Then, ugly tears that smeared her makeup and made her nose run. I'm sorry, Mama Ruth. I really am. I was stressed about money and worried about the rent, and I just wanted one holiday where I didn't have to worry about everyone's feelings and expectations. I wanted it to be simple. Simple, I repeated, like not having to deal with the woman who gave birth to your husband. That's not what I meant. But it's what you did. And now you're here asking that same woman to solve your problems because suddenly I'm special enough when you need something. I stepped back and put my hand on the door handle. Mama Ruth, please. The kids are cold and scared, and we don't have anywhere else to go. I'll do anything. I'll apologize to everyone. I'll make it right. You can't make it right, Vanessa. Some things can't be undone with apologies. Some hurt goes too deep to be fixed with words. So, what are you saying? I looked at this woman who had spent years making me feel unwelcome in my own son's life, who had turned my child against me slowly and systematically, who had robbed me of precious time with my grandchildren because she found my presence inconvenient. I'm saying that you made your choice about what kind of relationship you wanted with me. You chose to exclude me from your special people. You chose to make me feel like a burden instead of a blessing. You chose to turn my son into someone I barely recognize. But we need you now. Yes, you do. And that's the tragedy of it all. You had someone who would have moved heaven and earth for you and your children. Someone who would have given you anything you needed without question. Someone who loved your family unconditionally, but you threw that away because you found it inconvenient. Vanessa's crying intensified, and she reached out as if to touch my arm, but I stepped further back. Please, Mama Ruth, I'm begging you, don't punish the children for my mistakes. I'm not punishing anyone, Vanessa. I'm simply applying the same standards to our relationship that you applied. You said you only wanted special people in your life. Well, I only help special people. And according to you, I'm not special enough to be included in your family celebrations. That was different. No, it wasn't. It was exactly the same. The only difference is that now you need something from me, instead of the other way around. I could see Marcus getting out of the car, probably wondering why Vanessa was taking so long. Destiny's face was pressed against the window, looking toward my house with hope in her eyes. Those children love you, Vanessa said, following my gaze. Doesn't that mean anything to you? It means everything to me, which is why this situation breaks my heart. But loving them doesn't mean I have to accept disrespect from their parents. In fact, maybe watching their parents face consequences for their choices will teach Destiny and Cameron something about treating people with kindness and respect. Marcus was walking toward the porch now, and I could see the defeat in his shoulders, the way he moved like a man who had run out of options. Mom, he called out as he approached. Please, we'll do whatever you want. We'll follow any rules you set. We'll pay rent. We'll help with chores. Just please don't let your grandchildren be homeless. My grandchildren aren't homeless because of me, Marcus. They're homeless because their parents made choices that led to this situation. And those same parents chose to exclude their grandmother from Christmas because she wasn't special enough. We've already said we're sorry about that. Sorry doesn't fix it. Sorry doesn't give me back Christmas morning, waiting in my best dress for family that never came. Sorry doesn't erase the humiliation of calling you to find out you were having a wonderful time somewhere else, while I sat alone with enough food for 6 people. Marcus looked back at the car where his children were waiting, then back at me with desperation in his eyes. What do you want from us? Tell me what to do to fix this. I looked at my son, this man I had raised to be better than this, and I felt a sadness so deep it seemed to reach all the way down to my bones. I want you to understand that actions have consequences. I want you to learn that the people who love you deserve better than your leftover time and attention. I want you to realize that respect isn't something you can turn on and off depending on what you need. And then you'll help us? No, Marcus. Then you'll be the kind of man your father would have been proud of. But my helping you? That ship has sailed. I watched them drive away in that beat-up sedan, with my grandchildren's faces pressed against the rear window, and for a moment, my resolve almost cracked. Almost. But then I remembered Vanessa's words echoing in my mind like a curse. We had our own celebration, just for special people. The way she had smiled when she said it, like she was delivering some kind of gift instead of the cruelest blow a daughter-in-law could give. I closed the door and leaned against it, listening to the engine fade into the distance. My house felt different now, not empty, but somehow cleaner, like I had finally swept out years of accumulated disrespect and disappointment. The silence wasn't lonely anymore. It was dignified. But that peace was short-lived. Over the next week, my phone became a weapon of emotional warfare. Vanessa called at all hours, sometimes crying, sometimes angry, always desperate. She left voicemails that started with fake sweetness and ended with barely concealed threats about how I would regret abandoning my own blood. Marcus sent text messages that grew increasingly frantic as their situation deteriorated. Mom, the storage unit company is threatening to auction our stuff if we don't pay. Destiny asked why Grandmama doesn't love us anymore. The shelter has a waiting list. We're still sleeping in the car. Please, Mom, I'm begging you, we have nowhere else to turn. Each message was designed to twist the knife of guilt deeper into my heart. But something had fundamentally changed in me during those hours I spent alone on Christmas Day. The woman who used to drop everything when Marcus called, who used to send money without asking questions, who used to swallow every slight and insult to keep the peace. That woman was gone. In her place stood someone I barely recognized, but was beginning to respect. On January 10th, I was organizing my linen closet when I heard a commotion outside. Through my bedroom window, I could see Vanessa's sister, Patricia, standing on Mrs. Henderson's porch next door, gesticulating wildly while she spoke. Mrs. Henderson, bless her heart, was nodding sympathetically and glancing toward my house every few seconds. I'd known Patricia for years through church functions and community events. She was one of those women who thrived on drama, who collected other people's business like some folks collected stamps. She had a way of presenting herself as the reasonable voice in any crisis, the one who was just trying to help everyone get along. 20 minutes later, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Patricia standing there with what I'm sure she thought was a concerned expression, but looked more like barely contained glee. She was wearing her Sunday best, even though it was a Wednesday afternoon, which told me this visit was calculated to make an impression. "Ruth, honey," she said, in that syrupy voice she used when she was about to ask for something. "I hope you don't mind me stopping by unannounced. I've been so worried about this situation with Marcus and Vanessa And those precious babies. What situation is that, Patricia? I asked, not inviting her in. Well, you know they've been having some housing troubles, and Vanessa mentioned that there might have been some misunderstanding about Christmas dinner. I thought maybe I could help mediate, as family. Family. Patricia wasn't family to anyone involved, but she had appointed herself the neighborhood peacemaker whenever there was drama to be stirred up and gossip to be gathered. There's no misunderstanding, Patricia. Everything is perfectly clear. But Ruth, those children are living in a car, in January, in this cold weather. Surely you can't mean to let your own grandchildren suffer because of some silly argument between adults. The way she said, silly argument, made my teeth itch, as if being abandoned on Christmas Day, being told I wasn't special enough for my own family celebration, was just some minor disagreement that reasonable people should be able to work out. Patricia, I said slowly, did Vanessa tell you what happened at Christmas? She mentioned there was some confusion about dinner plans. What exactly did she say happened? Patricia shifted uncomfortably on my porch, and I could see her trying to figure out how much truth she could reveal without damaging her position as the helpful mediator. She said there were some hurt feelings about holiday arrangements, but that's normal in families. The important thing is those babies need a warm place to sleep, and you have this big house with plenty of room. I see. So she didn't mention that they promised to come for Christmas dinner, that I spent 2 days cooking, that I waited for 4 hours while they celebrated somewhere else without so much as a phone call to let me know they weren't coming. Patricia's expression changed slightly, and I could see her recalculating her approach. Well, I'm sure there were miscommunications on both sides. And did she mention that when I asked why they didn't come, she told me they only invited special people to their celebration, that she made it clear I wasn't special enough to spend Christmas with my own son and grandchildren. Now, Patricia looked genuinely uncomfortable, caught between her desire to mediate and her growing realization that she didn't have the full story. Ruth, I'm sure she didn't mean it the way it sounded. How else could she have meant it, Patricia? What other interpretation is there for telling someone they're not special enough to be included in their own family's Christmas celebration? But the children are in this situation because their parents made choices that led to eviction and homelessness. I didn't make those choices. I didn't skip rent payments. I didn't get them kicked out of their apartment. And I certainly didn't exclude anyone from Christmas dinner. Patricia tried one more approach, the one that people always used when they thought they could guilt me into compliance. But Ruth, you're a Christian woman. What would Jesus do in this situation? The question hit me like a slap, not because it stung, but because it was so predictable. Every time someone wanted me to accept disrespectful treatment, they invoked my faith, as if being a Christian meant being a doormat. Patricia, I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. Jesus also said to treat others as you would want to be treated. He said to honor your father and mother. He said that actions have consequences. Show me where in the Bible it says, I'm supposed to enable people who treat me with contempt. But forgiveness doesn't mean accepting continued abuse. Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending that hurtful actions don't matter. Forgiveness doesn't mean there are no consequences for treating people badly. Patricia was running out of ammunition, and I could see her getting frustrated with my refusal to play the role of the guilty grandmother who needed to be talked into doing the right thing. So, you're just going to let those babies suffer to prove a point? I'm going to let those babies' parents learn that their choices have consequences. Maybe next time they'll think twice before excluding grandmothers from family celebrations. Maybe they'll learn to manage their money better. Maybe they'll discover that the people who love them deserve better treatment than they've been giving. This is ridiculous, Ruth. You're being petty and vindictive. There was that word again, vindictive, as if protecting my dignity and demanding basic respect was some kind of character flaw. Patricia, let me ask you something. If someone told you that you weren't special enough to spend Christmas with your family, then came to you a week later asking for a place to live, what would you do? She opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again. We both knew what she would do. That's what I thought, I said. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have things to do. I closed the door and watched through the window as Patricia marched back to her car, pulling out her phone before she even reached the curb. Within an hour, I was sure half the neighborhood would know her version of our conversation. Painted in whatever light made her look like the voice of reason in me, like the heartless grandmother. But I found that I didn't care. For the first time in years, I cared more about my own self-respect than about what other people thought of my choices. The calls and messages continued for another week, growing more desperate as their situation became more precarious. Marcus sent me pictures of the children sleeping in the back seat of the car, bundled up in blankets, clearly hoping the images would break my resolve. Vanessa left voicemails describing in detail how cold they were, how Destiny was asking why they couldn't go to Grandmama's warm house, how Cameron was getting sick from sleeping in the car. Each message was designed to make me feel like a monster, like the kind of grandmother who would let her own grandchildren suffer to satisfy her wounded pride. But every time I felt my resolve weakening, I remembered that moment when Vanessa looked me in the eye and told me about their celebration for special people only. On January 18th, something interesting happened. I was at the grocery store when I ran into Vanessa's sister, Patricia, the same one who had tried to mediate the week before she was in the cereal aisle, with her cart full of name-brand everything, wearing a new coat that looked expensive. "Oh, Ruth," she said when she saw me, her voice overly bright and friendly. "How are you doing, honey?" "I'm doing well, Patricia. How's your sister?" "Well, they're still having their housing situation. It's just heartbreaking, really, those poor babies." I said, continuing to shop for my own groceries. "I heard you didn't have room for them at your place." Patricia's smile faltered slightly. "Well, we have a small apartment, and with my mother-in-law living with us temporarily, there just wasn't space for 4 more people." "Of course not," I agreed. "That would be quite crowded. But you have that big house with all those empty bedrooms. It seems like such a waste when family is in need." I stopped pushing my cart and turned to look at Patricia directly. "Patricia, let me ask you something. When was the last time Vanessa invited you to spend Christmas with her family?" "Well, we usually do our own thing." "That's not what I asked. When was the last time she specifically invited you to join them for Christmas dinner?" Patricia shifted uncomfortably, rearranging items in her cart to avoid meeting my eyes. "Every year," she said finally. "She always makes sure I'm included." "How nice for you. And what do you think she would say if you asked her why I wasn't invited to Christmas dinner this year?" "I'm sure it was just a misunderstanding." "It wasn't a misunderstanding, Patricia. It was a choice. She chose to exclude me and then made sure I knew I wasn't special enough to be included. So I'm making my own choice now." I started to walk away, then turned back. "By the way, Patricia, you might want to ask your sister about that expensive vacation she took to Miami last month, the one she paid for while she was supposedly too broke to pay rent. Interesting priorities, don't you think?" Patricia's mouth fell open, and I could see the wheels turning in her head as she processed this information that Vanessa had clearly not shared with the family. "Have a blessed day," I said, and continued my shopping. The truth was, I had learned about the Miami vacation from Mrs. Henderson, who had seen the photos on Vanessa's social media before she made her accounts private. Apparently, while they were falling behind on rent, they had decided to take a long weekend trip to celebrate their anniversary. 3 days at a fancy hotel, expensive dinners, a shopping spree that Vanessa had documented extensively online. But the vacation wasn't the only interesting financial choice they had made. Through my network of church friends and community connections, I had learned quite a bit about Marcus and Vanessa's spending habits over the past few months. The new furniture they had bought in November, while they were already 2 months behind on rent, the expensive Christmas gifts they had given each other and posted about on social media, the regular date nights at restaurants that cost more than I spent on groceries in a week. They hadn't been evicted because of one missed payment or an unexpected emergency. They had been evicted because they consistently chose immediate gratification over financial responsibility, counting on family members like me to bail them out when their choices caught up with them. Learning these details had only strengthened my resolve. This wasn't about a family facing hard times through no fault of their own. This was about adults who made irresponsible choices and expected others to clean up their messes while showing no respect for the people they expected help from. On January 22nd, I got a call from someone I hadn't expected to hear from. It was Marcus's old friend, David, someone I had known since the boys were in high school together. "Mrs. Johnson," he said, his voice careful and respectful, "I hope you don't mind me calling. Marcus gave me your number and asked me to reach out to you. What can I do for you, David?" "Well, I heard about the situation with Marcus and his family, and I wanted to see if there might be some way to work things out. I know Marcus really well, and I think he's just stressed and not thinking clearly." David had always been a good kid, respectful and polite, the kind of friend I had hoped Marcus would learn from. If anyone could make a reasonable case for reconciliation, it would be him, David. "What exactly did Marcus tell you about the situation?" "He said there was some kind of disagreement about Christmas dinner, and now you're not speaking to each other. He's really broken up about it, Mrs. Johnson. He says he doesn't understand why you won't help them when they need you the most." Interesting. So Marcus's version of events was that there had been some kind of disagreement about Christmas dinner. Not that they had promised to come and then disappeared without explanation. Not that Vanessa had explicitly told me I wasn't special enough to be included in their celebration. "David, let me tell you what actually happened, and then you can decide if you think I'm being unreasonable." I told him the whole story, the 3 weeks of planning, the 2 days of cooking, the 4 hours of waiting, the phone call where I learned they had chosen to celebrate elsewhere, Vanessa's comment about special people, the eviction, the demand that I house them after they had excluded me from their lives. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the phone. "Mrs. Johnson," David said finally, his voice quieter than before, "I had no idea. Marcus made it sound like you had gotten upset over some minor change in dinner plans. Now you know the truth. So tell me, David, do you think I'm being unreasonable?" Another pause. "Honestly? No, ma'am. If someone treated my grandmother that way, I'd be furious. I can't believe Marcus let Vanessa talk to you like that. So, you understand why I can't just pretend it didn't happen?" "Yes, ma'am, I do. But Mrs. Johnson, what about the kids? I know Marcus and Vanessa made some bad choices, but Destiny and Cameron didn't do anything wrong. It was the same argument everyone kept making, and I understood the logic behind it. The children were innocent victims of their parents' poor decisions. But I had come to realize that protecting children from the consequences of their parents' actions wasn't always the kindest thing to do in the long run. David, let me ask you something. What kind of lesson would I be teaching those children if I rescued their parents every time they made irresponsible choices? What would I be teaching them about how to treat the people who love them? I hadn't thought about it that way. Those children need to learn that actions have consequences. They need to see that you can't treat people badly and expect them to keep helping you. They need parents who take responsibility for their choices instead of expecting grandmothers to clean up their messes. But in the meantime, they're the ones suffering. Yes, they are. And that breaks my heart. But their suffering is the result of their parents' choices, not mine. I didn't choose to spend money on vacations. Instead of rent, I didn't choose to exclude family from Christmas celebrations. I didn't choose to treat my mother-in-law with disrespect and contempt. David was quiet for a moment, processing what I had told him. Mrs. Johnson, is there anything Marcus and Vanessa could do to make this right? Any way they could earn your forgiveness? It was a fair question, and one I had been asking myself for weeks. Was there a path back from this? Some gesture or apology that could repair what had been broken? David, some things can't be undone. Some words can't be taken back. Some hurt goes too deep to be fixed with apologies. They showed me who they really are and how they really see me. I can't unknow that. So there's no hope for reconciliation. Not the way things were before that relationship was built on me accepting less than I deserved and pretending their disrespect didn't hurt. I won't go back to that. What if they really changed? What if they learned from this? Then they'll be better people, and their children will benefit from that. But my helping them won't teach them anything except that they can treat me however they want, and I'll still be there to rescue them. After I hung up with David, I sat in my living room thinking about paths not taken. There had been so many opportunities over the years for Marcus and Vanessa to choose differently. So many moments when they could have shown me respect instead of taking me for granted. So many times when they could have included me instead of making me feel like an obligation. But they had made their choices consistently, over and over, until the pattern was undeniable. And now, they were living with the consequences of those choices, just as I was living with the consequences of finally standing up for myself. The next morning brought a surprise visitor. I was watering my houseplants when I saw a police car pull up in front of my house. My heart started racing, thinking something terrible had happened to one of the children. But when the officer got out and walked to my door, his expression was more annoyed than concerned. "Mrs. Johnson?" he asked when I opened the door. "Yes, officer. Is everything all right?" "I'm Officer Williams. I'm here because we received a report that you might be endangering the welfare of minor children by refusing to provide them with housing." My blood ran cold. They had called the police on me. My own son had sicked the authorities on me for the crime of not letting them move into my house after they had humiliated me. "Officer Williams, I'm not sure I understand. Are you saying it's illegal for me to decide who can and cannot live in my own home?" He looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. "Ma'am, of course it's not illegal," he said, looking increasingly uncomfortable with the situation. "But we have to investigate reports of child endangerment. I can see that you're clearly not endangering anyone. The people who called seemed to think you had some legal obligation to house your grandchildren." "I see. And what did you tell them?" "I told them that grandparents don't have a legal duty to provide housing for their adult children's families. But I said I'd come by and make sure everything was on the up and up. He paused, looking around my well-maintained porch and tidy front yard. Clearly, you're doing just fine, Mrs. Johnson. I'm sorry to have bothered you with this. After he left, I realized they had reached a new level of desperation. Using the police to try to force me into compliance was a step I hadn't expected even from them. But it also confirmed that I had made the right choice. People who would weaponize law enforcement against their own family member weren't people who deserved my help. That evening, I called my sister Diana in Chicago, the one family member I trusted completely. I told her everything that had happened, from Christmas Day to the police visit. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "Ruth," she said finally, "I'm proud of you." Those 4 words meant more to me than all the guilt and manipulation I'd been subjected to over the past month. "You think I did the right thing?" "Honey, you did the only thing. That boy needed to learn that his mama isn't a doormat, and that girl needed to learn that actions have consequences. You can't treat people like garbage and expect them to keep helping you. But the grandchildren have 2 parents who made choices that put them in this situation. You didn't make those choices, Ruth. You just stopped cleaning up the mess." 6 months later, I heard through the community grapevine that Marcus had finally gotten a steady job, and they had found a small apartment across town. The children were doing well in school, and from what I observed from a distance at community events, they seemed healthy and happy. Vanessa had also gotten a job for the first time since I'd known her, and apparently the responsibility had been good for both of them. They never called to apologize. They never acknowledged the hurt they had caused or the lessons they had learned. But they also never asked me for help again. Sometimes the best gift you can give someone is the opportunity to grow up, even if they're already adults. As for me, I discovered that the house wasn't empty at all. It was full of peace, full of self-respect, full of the quiet dignity that comes from knowing your worth. I started hosting dinner parties for my church friends, traveling to visit Diana, and volunteering at the community center. My calendar filled up with activities that brought me joy instead of obligation. And every Christmas since then, I set my table for the people who truly want to be there. The ones who see spending time with me as a gift rather than a burden. The ones who understand that being invited to someone's table is an honor, not a chore. Sometimes love means saying no. Sometimes family means setting boundaries. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let people experience the full weight of their choices. I learned that at 73 years old, it's never too late to remember your worth and demand the respect you deserve.